Hello everybody, Big Friendly with Gen X Memories back with another video for you. In this video, I'd like to go over what I feel like, in my own personal opinion, 5 of the worst games ever released for the Atari 2600. Now, I took quite a while to go through this, and I realized that this is something that you could get thousands of people that played the Atari back in the 80s and asked them the same question, and you may not get the same answer twice. And I realize it's, which I'm hoping y'all will engage in the comments and offer y'all's own opinions. But for my parameters, I do have some parameters for this selection. One thing is that I had to have played the game back in the 80s when the Atari was in its heyday, in the early to mid 80s, I guess you'd say. And so, yes, I know what Firefly is, guys. I have played it, but only in the last few years after hearing so much about it being it. It is probably one of the worst games I've ever seen. But I didn't play it, 40 years ago. So it's only games that I actually played. And let's see, I think my choices were also based on disappointment upon the release of the game. Maybe it was hyped up a good bit, or you were just excited about it, and when it came out it just turned out to be a real clunker. That's another factor. And the final factor would be the game is just so terrible. I mean, it's absolutely horrible that it should never have been released. It's a dog. It's a disgrace. And the only reason you would even have it, a physical copy today, would be just from a collection standpoint. You would never take the time to put it into an Atari or a 2600 Plus to even waste your time, because the game is so terrible. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it and see what I got. Coming in at number 5 on our list, we have Defender, released in 1982. Now, I remember when the arcade version of Defender came out very well. I remember one of the first times I ever saw it, I was watching my older brother play, and I was totally just blown away by the way the graphics, the color of the graphics, the sound effects. It was just so cool. An incredibly hard game, but really, really neat for its time. And naturally, whenever I heard it was going to be out on the 2600, I got excited. I was looking forward to it. Now, we all knew you wouldn't get the exact same experience you got at the arcade, but Atari had already proven that they could capture the essence of an arcade game and port it to the 2600 and make it close enough to where it would still be fun to play. Not as good as the arcade, but hey, you're not feeding it quarters. You can play it all day long for free. So, we knew it was possible to have a good port of Defender. Now, when the game was released, one of my best friends at the time, Jim, his family had an Atari, and they had gotten it. So I was able to play it at their house first. And let's just say, when I saw it, I was like, come on. I mean, the flicker is just horrible. The choppiness. Whenever if you press the button fast enough, when you're firing, your ship disappears every time you press the button. So, you can't get hit sometimes. Some of the enemies' shots will go through you. It's just, I think it's a disgrace when you compare this to, say, Missile Command, Berserk, or any number of other 2600 arcade ports. This is just one of the worst. I think that Defender missed some of. It didn't catch a lot of flack. I think PacMan took the brunt of it, because they were released, I think, at about the same time. And I think, PacMan, of course, had more hype around it. So I think that they saved Defender from getting dogged more than it was. But I wouldn't touch this game. I would not mess with it. Atari did release Stargate in 1984, and it was a huge improvement. It's the kind of thing that if it would have been released originally as the original Defender, it would have been a huge, huge hit. So I would play that instead, or I would recommend Chopper Command by Activision. It's like night and day. Chopper Command is flicker-free, scrolls great. Either one of those games, though. But that's why Defender is on my number 5 on my list. All right, let's move on. My number 4 selection for worst 2600 game, and speak of the devil, it's going to be PacMan. Okay, once again, I dodged a bullet like I did with Defender. I remember the hype for this thing. It was big time. I mean, it had been such a huge hit. I remember when we were at the beach on vacation. My dad knew a man who he would loan us his condo for a week, and it was so fun. We'd go to the beach, Navarre Beach, which is down near. It's maybe 30 minutes to an hour away from Destin. But we would go there for a week, and there was a Holiday Inn up the road that had a restaurant. It was real nice, and they had an arcade in there. This would have been around 80 or 81. And I remember everybody freaking out about Pac-Man, even the grown-ups. I mean, we're like, the moms were, talking about how cute it was and everything. So it was such a big game. And so naturally, we were excited for it when it came to the 2600. And I lucked out. My dad was a State Farm agent, and of course, he was friends with a lot of the other agents. They would play golf and do stuff together. Anyway, I was with my mom, and we happened to be going over to the house of one of the other agents, one of his friends, and his daughter had gotten Pac-Man for the 2600. And so I'm watching her and a couple of her friends play, and they're laughing and having a good time. And I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be a jerk, but I was really thinking to myself, come on, is this really it? Is this really the best they could do? I mean, it's just the sounds are grating. I mean, Pac-Man doesn't even turn up to eat. I mean, it's just terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And I realize there are a lot of people, and I've heard them say, well, it was all we had, so we played it. And, well, I wasn't like that. I mean, I might have played it some, but I thought it totally sucked. And I'm glad that I never got stuck buying that clunker. It was a piece of crap. And when Miss Pac-Man came out a year or two later, just like when Stargate came out, if they wouldn't have been so cheap, if Atari hadn't have been so cheap, and they just would have bumped it to an 8K game like they did Asteroids, then they probably could have had something like Miss Pac-Man, and it would have been great, And I realize I think that Pac-Man's the number 1 best-selling game for the Atari of all time, but that still doesn't mean it's a good game. It stinks. And that's why it is number 4 on my selection for worst Atari 2600 games. All right. At number 3, we have Crips of Chaos by 20th Century Fox Games, released in 1982. Now, 20th Century Fox, they had some good games. So be looking at the box art and the font style, this looks really cool. But once again, I was saved. My friend Jim, the same poor sap who ended up with Defender, he also got this, but he loved it. I mean, Jim was a real smart kid. I mean, he solved the Rubik's Cube. He was the first person that I ever knew that could solve the Rubik's Cube. And he could do that, and all those knockoff cubes that came thereafter, he solved all them too. But he also loved D&D, and I never could really get into it. I would play sometimes with, just to pass time, but I just never could get into it that much. But he loved it, so he loved this game. But I was just sitting there thinking, man, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, when the little enemies come up to you, they look like they're about 3 inches tall, like you could just stomp them with your foot. And I understand what they were trying to do here. I mean, but it didn't work. I mean, you got other games, but I think they have more memory. I think this is only a 4K game, and there was that Tunnel Runner game. Remember that? I think that had 8K, or it had some kind of buffer, or something to extend the RAM or something. So it looked a lot better. This just, to me, is really just not playable. And you get to the end of a hallway, and you're supposed to be at a dead end, but then a creature still comes out of nowhere to attack you. I never could make sense of this thing, and I thought it looked terrible, and it's pretty pitiful, and I think it stinks. So that's why it is number 3 on my list. Number 2, we have Sword Quest Earthworld, released in 1982. And what is, in my opinion, one of the absolute biggest blunders and blown opportunities that Atari ever had was the whole Sword Quest series. Now, this thing on the surface looked fantastic. I mean, you have 4 separate games. You got solid gold and jeweled prizes, one for each game, and then a final playoff for the Sword of Ultimate Sorcery. And everybody can have a chance to win this contest for each game. I mean, you have major promotions in magazines. You know, it's going to be epic. It's being called the next adventure. Adventure. We all remember that game. That was fantastic. Even as simplistic as it was, we loved adventure. Everybody likes it. And they're going to do something that's going to look even cooler and be fun and be like adventure. Oh man, this is going to be a no-brainer. It's a winner. There's no way they can mess it up. And then they proceeded to make a game that did absolutely nothing. It had no rhyme. It had no reason. There was no puzzle. There was no quest. There was nothing. And unfortunately for me, I didn't want to believe that back in 1982 and 83 when I was playing this thing. I wanted to think there had to be some way to beat this, and there wasn't. And I spent, you know how modern games are? Well, not even modern, for a long time now, like the Elder Scrolls series. You know, you can go on that and check all your statistics, and it will tell you exactly how long you've been playing the game. I mean, Steam does that whenever you pull up a title that you bought. If that would have been possible, I bet I logged days and days on this thing, trying to figure it out, poring over the instructions, over the comic, trying to figure it out. It's terrible, and Atari should be ashamed of themselves for doing this. And it was a blown opportunity, and in my opinion, another nail in their coffin toward the end, whenever the whole thing was going down the crapper, the whole company was. I could talk about this game for a long time just because I was so heavily vested in it. Back in the day, I wanted to beat it. I really did. And it's nothing but a cruel joke that Atari played on this. And if I ever met the programmer, I would really love to ask him, man, what was going on? What happened? Because they had everything, I mean, the comics, everything was set up so perfect. All they had to do is make a game. I was thinking if they'd have done something like Raiders of the Lost Ark, maybe, you know, an actual game where you have to figure a quest out. You know, sure, more people would have finished it, but I mean, they send in their entries, you just draw them out of draw the winners. But no, they just totally blew it. And this whole thing ended up being just a total, it was a joke. They didn't even finish it. That's all I can talk about that thing right now. I start getting upset.
Well, out with it.
And finally, at number 1 for the worst game ever for the 2600, we have Skeet Shoot by Apollo Games. Now, before I show you this despicable and deplorable game, let me give you a quick backstory on this company, Games by Apollo. Now, in 1981, I think it might be safe to say that was when Atari was at their height. They'd had some really great games come out, and they'd made a lot of money. Well, I should say games that came out that people liked that made them a lot of money. And things were looking good. And you had these companies come along. I guess you could call them fly-by-night. I mean, they were just basically jumping on the bandwagon, trying to cash in on the popularity of home video games. They'd gotten so popular. But the problem was a lot of them, they either didn't care or they didn't have programmers that knew what they were doing. And a lot of the games were just terrible. They were garbage. And whenever I think back to that time, for some reason, Games by Apollo, to me, is one of the main culprits that did this. And this game, Skeet Shoot, is one of the worst things I've ever seen. And I could not imagine spending my birthday money, or if I'd been cutting lawns, or even if my parents bought it for me, getting this at the store, riding home, putting this into your Atari, and then realizing you'd spent, I don't know, I'm not sure what they charged this thing. I bet it was between $20 and $30 when it was new. But it's almost unplayable. I mean, it's terrible. You see that figure at the bottom of the screen? That's supposed to be a guy with a shotgun. The direction is terrible. You can't even. It's just I won't subject you to this nightmare any more than I have to. But a lot of people may not agree with my list, but I'm sure that a lot of them will agree. This is definitely one of the worst excuses ever put out to the gaming public, and it's a lot of the video game crash. A lot of it was just because of garbage like this being flooded into the market and unsuspecting buyers buying this junk, and that's why retailers ended up having to peddle this stuff for $1 or $2 in bins when the crash happened. Now, I got a chance to see this game probably in 1982. In fact, it was probably 82 or maybe early 83. I was at the home video game club my mom took me to once a week to rent a game to take home. And the man who typically ran the place, Mr. Sherman, he was an older gentleman in his 60s. Him and his 2 sons owned the business, but he usually was there most of the time. And I picked it up and I was looking at it, and he told me, he said, "Scott, put it down. You don't waste your money on that junk." And so I had to see it. So I plugged it in, and he showed it to me, and he was telling me, he's like, "Look, you can't even hit these things. Even he's just like, this thing's not even, it doesn't work. It's just terrible." So thanks to Mr. Sherman back in 1982 or right around in there for tipping me off. So I didn't even know the rental was only like for maybe $2 or $3 for the week. I still didn't waste it on that because you couldn't pay me to play this crap. A skeet shoot is just one of the worst things I've ever seen. Do not get anywhere near this unless you're a collector. It is a semi-rare game, so if you're looking for a copy, that'd be the only reason I'd even have one. I wouldn't want to be caught dead with this thing otherwise. And there you have it. There's my top 5. I'd love to know what y'all think. Jump in the comments. Tell me what your worst, most hated games are for all time. Am I crazy on my list? I'd love to hear from y'all and let you know. Please like and subscribe. I think I'm up to 19 subscribers. All right. So if you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. I'm learning, so hopefully things will get better as I go along. I appreciate y'all watching to the end, and y'all have a great day. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.